Speaking of the fact that UK politicians essentially just do whatever the US State Department want them to do in terms of foreign policy, there has been a breaking story in the last couple of days which has absolutely sent me south. So the relief agency that helps people in Gaza, run by the United Nations, has been one of the places which was used for testimony with regards to South Africa's case in the International Court of Justice against Israel in terms of provisional measures to prevent genocide with their military incursion into Gaza. And the very next day after that judgment was found, using evidence from the relief agency, one of whom people continually say in the Israel defenders camp are just another wing of Hamas, or you can't trust the relief agencies, you can't trust the United Nations because they're all in league with Hamas, just like apparently every other international government that supports the Palestinians. But apparently they're all just Hamas now, according to certain members of the pro-Israeli journalism sphere in our country. The very next day after the Israel's judgment at the ICJ, telling them to essentially make sure they don't commit genocide, the relief agency whose testimony was used in that case has come into somewhat of disrepute. Now, the disrepute in question is Israeli allegations. I want to very much specify this as allegations at this stage. These are not proven, these are not definite, these are just allegations at this point that have been levied by Israel, that some members of the United Nations Relief Works Agency in Gaza were involved in the October the 7th attacks on Israel by the resistance forces of Palestine, namely Hamas, PIJ, and the DF and PFLP. Now, the number of people that they allege to have been involved in the October the 7th attacks, 12. Out of 13,000 Relief Works Agency workers, 12. Apparently, again, these are just allegations at this point. Nothing has been proven, nothing is definite, there has been no investigation as of yet. There's been a response from this. The first response was from the Relief Works Agency, which was to terminate immediately the contracts of the people that, again, only alleged to have engaged in the attacks on October 7th, only allegations at this stage. They've immediately terminated their contracts, doing an internal investigation, which I think is very reasonable. If you think that there might be terrorists working for you, it doesn't seem unreasonable to want to at least have an investigation to find out whether or not they were involved or not. The serious allegations have been levied, worth making sure you know whether or not that they were involved at all. Even if I don't think the likelihood is very high, it cannot hurt. It can only be a good thing to try and investigate it to make sure that you have all of the truth of the matter at hand. No issues with the response from the Relief Works Agency. What I do have a problem with is the response of literally the entirety of Western governments, apart from Norway. Actually, Norway have been pretty good on this. There has been removal of funding to the Relief Works Agency in Gaza, the agency that's literally keeping Gazans alive during a humanitarian crisis caused by a desire for ethnic cleansing by the IOF and the State of Israel. They have removed funding from the only organisation there on the ground there to stop innocent Palestinian civilians dying. Honestly, you couldn't make this shit up. Over just allegations that 12 members out of 13,000 workers were involved in the October the 7th attacks, right? And there's a few reasons why this is happening now. The first of all is because this has taken over all of the news sites. All of those journalists who didn't tweet at all about the ICJ ruling over Israel's genocidal actions in Gaza, the complete radio silence from the Koensberg and the Rigsbys and the Pestons of this world over the ICJ judgment, that's all been forgotten now. That's all been forgotten in the wake of the knowledge that there are just allegations of a very, very small number of people who work in the Relief Works Agency having been involved in the October the 7th attacks. 0.09% or something, a very, very small number. Again, just allegations. I want to make this incredibly clear. They are cutting off vital funding to relief workers during an awful humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip because of allegations levied at a tiny minority of a 13,000 strong cohort of Relief Works Agency workers. This is, I feel like I live on a different planet at this point. With an incredibly different set of values. They can watch a genocide happen in real time, watch the Israeli government get told to stop doing it by the International Court of Justice, and their immediate response from David Cameron was to essentially throw out the charge by South Africa as being nonsensical, and on that very same day remove funding from relief workers trying to stop the genocide from happening. And that's all the news now is. All the news has been taken up by this, specifically over the alleged relief works agency's ties to Hamas, essentially, which is the narrative that you've been hearing all this time. Oh, you can't believe the United Nations, they're pro-Hamas. You can't believe all of these relief workers, they're all pro-Hamas, coming from like the Zionist people within our media ecosphere. And what is done, because there was reliance on these people's testimonies in the case made against Israel at the ICJ, whilst throughout the entire trial period, they were saying, oh, you can't trust them, they're with Hamas. And then as soon as the judgment doesn't go Israel's way, suddenly they've got these allegations about all of these relief workers in the agency that was used as a source for a load of their claims in the tribunal at the ICJ. Don't you find that weird? Don't you find that a little bit suspect? Don't you find that an incredibly useful coincidence for the IOF and the State of Israel? That just soon as this judgment happens, they just magically find that some members of the aid group in Gaza were involved in the October the 7th attacks. Now, the thing is that these allegations may well be true. These allegations may well very much be true. I am not discounting the idea that they may well be true. But even if they are found to be completely true, this still would not even come close to justifying the removal of funding for the aid workers during this humanitarian crisis. It is literally a communist. It's absolutely unhuman of these Western governments to just remove this funding because of a tiny minority doing a bad thing, allegedly. What, you're going to defund the NHS because of Harold Shipman? A couple of bad eggs are going to mean that we have to get rid of the whole thing? It's utterly unreal. Like, Norway is the only government that's continued funding this because, of course, they need to be. They need to be funding this to ensure that this humanitarian crisis where diseases are spreading, people are hungry, civilians are dying in their droves, is at least some way continually funded to ensure that they can properly deal with this crisis. US, Italy, Australia, Canada all suspended additional funding. Just utterly unreal. Utterly demonic actions by our governments over this. Ireland as well, of course, but it's probably should be taken as read that Ireland were going to be sticking with the Palestinians on this one. But it's being specifically done, and the information is being specifically disseminated so people do not trust the words that are coming out of the people who are there to try and prevent the civilian catastrophe that's happening. The third reason, and this is the most despicable reason, why this charge is being levied specifically at this time, to try and get Western backers to stop funding them very specifically. Not because necessarily they just want all of the people to die. I've always said this from the start. I genuinely don't believe that the main goal of the extreme elements of the Israeli government, I don't believe they genuinely want loads of Palestinians to die. I don't think they care whether or not they die or not, really and truly. But what they do want is to ensure that those people leave. They want them to not be there so they can take the territory. If people have to die to get there, then so be it, right? But they're not specifically there for the deaths of Palestinians. What they really want to ensure is that living conditions are so bad, people are forced to leave. That is what this is being done for. By removing funding from the relief works agencies that is making sure these people can survive in the Gaza Strip, this makes the voluntary migration, nay, ethnic cleansing of the population of Gaza, much easier. Why they destroy the homes, it's why they've nuked the infrastructure, it's why they're creating the buffer zones and blowing up civilians' houses in violation of international law. It's why they're trying to get Western governments to stop backing the relief agencies, and why they've tried to get Western governments to take in Palestinian refugees, because they want them gone. They want them ethnically cleansed and they want the territory. They want to create the greater Israeli state. Of course, murder, leave, it's semantics as far as they are concerned, but their crucial objective is the acquisition of territory and the flight of the Palestinians. And that's why they deliberately create these unlivable conditions. The United Nations specifically created a term called a domicide to describe the deliberate destruction of civilian infrastructure. And that's what they've engaged in, because that's what will make them leave. It's as simple as that. And the moral authority of the West is over. It's gone. So much for the rules-based international order that Western governments claim to love so much. In the highest court in the world, Israel are forced on provisional measures to prevent them from genociding the population in Gaza. And what do our governments do? Do they remove their sales of weapons for the Israeli government to engage in that genocide? Do they try and force the Israeli government to stop doing what they're doing? Are they putting international pressure on Israel to, in fact, not do the genocide that they're obviously currently doing at the moment? Do they at all? Do they ever? No. What's the one action they take? Remove funding from aid workers trying to stop civilians from dying. The moral authority is gone. It's over. This is a turning point in the structure of the world in terms of international relations as we know it. And a new world will have to be created. Unfortunately, one will hope that the people, to be fair, the Western governments have always fallen foul of international law, but it's now so stark in how little they care about the international rules-based order now, so on and so forth. Just unbelievable. Unbelievable.